My parents gave my brother $250,000 and called me worthless. Stay with me as I share what happened, and if it touches your heart, don't forget to show some love by subscribing, liking, and sharing with the people who matter to you. My name is Hannah Whitaker. I'm 28 years old, and I've worked as a nurse ever since I could finish school. I spend long nights in the hospital, caring for people I barely know, because I've always believed in helping others. But in my own home, in my own family, I was invisible. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I achieved, my parents never seemed to see me. My brother Caleb was their pride and joy. He's 32 now, with a business degree that never really turned into anything. He's failed at one startup after another, but somehow my parents treat him like he's a genius who's just waiting for his big break. They brag about him to neighbors, tell everyone about his potential, and keep making excuses every time he fails. Meanwhile, I'd come home with stories from the hospital, saving lives, staying on my feet for 12-hour shifts, working through exhaustion, and my parents would barely nod. If Caleb walked into the room and mentioned some vague business idea, they'd light up as though he'd solved world hunger. That was my childhood in a nutshell. Him in the spotlight, me standing in the shadows. One night, everything came crashing down for me. I came by the house after a long shift, hoping maybe we'd have a quiet dinner together. But before I stepped into the dining room, I overheard voices from the living room. My parents were sitting with Caleb, their faces glowing with pride. $250,000, my father said, almost proudly. This will secure your future, son. Use it wisely. My heart stopped. 250,000? That wasn't a loan. That was a gift. That was everything my parents had saved, everything they had built up for the family, and they were giving it all to Caleb. I stepped into the room, my voice shaking. Are you serious? You're giving Caleb that much money? The room fell quiet for a moment. My mom, Elaine, sighed and gave me a tired look, as if I had interrupted something unimportant. Hannah, you wouldn't understand. Caleb needs this to make something of himself. You'll never amount to anything beyond what you are now. This money would be wasted on you. Her words hit me like a punch. I felt my throat close up. I stared at my dad, waiting for him to defend me, but he just nodded. Your mother's right. Caleb has potential. You've chosen a steady but simple life. It's not the same. In that moment, something broke inside me. All the years of being overlooked, all the times my achievements had been brushed aside, it all boiled over. Worthless. That's what they saw when they looked at me. I didn't argue further. I just stood there, shaking, my hands clenched into fists. Inside, though, I made myself a promise. They would regret ever calling me worthless. I wouldn't let this betrayal slide. I grew up in a house where love wasn't shared equally. From the time I was little, it was clear to me that Caleb was the one who mattered most. He was the golden child, the one my parents saw as their future, while I was just there. I can still remember my 6th birthday party. I had a small cake with a few candles, while Caleb, even though it wasn't his birthday, had a bigger slice with extra frosting because he liked it more. Everyone laughed it off. I told myself not to care, but the memory stuck with me like a scar. In school, I worked hard. I loved learning, and I always pushed myself. When I brought home good grades, I'd rush to show them. My mom would glance at the paper and say, "That's nice, Hannah." But when Caleb got a C on a math test, she'd smile and say, "It's okay, honey. You tried your best." My father would pat him on the back and tell him he was smart and talented. I waited for those words, but they never came my way. It wasn't just school. It was every part of life. Caleb could break things around the house, and they'd laugh it off as boys being boys. If I forgot to put my shoes away, my mom would scold me, telling me I was careless and ungrateful. The message was clear. His mistakes were forgivable. Mine were flaws in my character. One moment stands out more than most. I must have been about 12 years old. I had just won first place in a spelling bee, and I came home so proud, carrying that little golden trophy like it was worth $1 million. I showed it to my mom, hoping she'd smile, maybe hug me. Instead, she put it down on the counter and said, "That's good, Hannah, but don't make a fuss. Caleb has a science project coming up. That's more important." Later that evening, I heard her tell a neighbor on the phone, "Caleb is our legacy. You'll understand one day." She didn't even mention me. I pretended I didn't care, but inside it hurt more than anything. I wanted to believe that if I kept working hard, if I kept being good, they would notice me. But they never did. Caleb could stumble and fall, and they'd catch him every single time. I could succeed and they'd barely blink. When I overheard about the $250,000, it wasn't just money. It was a lifetime of favoritism carved in stone. It was my parents choosing, once again, to bet everything on Caleb while treating me like I didn't matter. That night, something inside me shifted. I realized I had been wasting years chasing their approval, begging silently for love that was never going to come. So I made a quiet promise to myself. I was done. Done trying, done hoping, done waiting for them to see me. From now on, I would live for me, not for them. The night of the family dinner still burns in my memory. I had convinced myself to show up, thinking maybe I could just sit quietly and survive it. Maybe a small part of me still hoped they'd see me differently, that they'd at least try to treat me like I mattered. But I should have known better. The table was set the way my mom always liked: fancy plates, polished silver, candles that smelled too strong. Caleb sat at the head of the table as if he owned the place, a glass of wine in his hand, grinning like he had the world figured out. I took my seat near the end, already bracing myself. It didn't take long for the show to begin. Caleb leaned back in his chair and announced, "So, with the money Mom and Dad gave me, I'm starting a new business. This one is going to be huge." His voice was smug, heavy with confidence he hadn't earned. My parents' eyes lit up immediately. "Oh, Caleb, that's wonderful," my mother gushed. "We always knew you'd do something special." My dad nodded, his chest swelling with pride. "You're a true Whitaker. Always thinking big." Meanwhile, I sat there, my food untouched, listening to them pour praise into him like he was some kind of savior. After a few minutes, my mom glanced at me and said, "Hannah, could you help clear the dishes from the kitchen?" "Not. What do you think of your brother's plans?" "Not. How's work at the hospital?" "Just go help. Like a servant in my own family." I swallowed my anger, carried the dishes, and came back to hear Caleb laughing. He smirked at me, leaning back in his chair. "You know, Hannah, nursing is cute and all, but real money takes brains." The words sliced through me. My chest tightened, my hands shook. I looked at him, then at my parents, waiting, hoping they would say something, defend me, remind him I was their daughter too. But they didn't. They just smiled at him, proud of their golden boy. Something in me snapped. My voice came out louder than I expected. "Do you even hear yourselves? You've never once valued me. Everything I've done, everything I've worked for, you've brushed aside like it's nothing. But Caleb fails over and over, and you treat him like a king." The room went silent. My mother's fork froze in midair. My dad's jaw tightened. Caleb just looked amused, like he was enjoying the show. Then my father muttered, almost under his breath, "You're just bitter because you'll never be more than average." Average. That was the last straw. My throat burned, but no tears came this time. I pushed back my chair so hard it scraped the floor. "I'm done," I said, my voice sharp and final. "I'm never coming back here again." And with that, I walked out, leaving their perfect dinner and their perfect golden boy behind. I swore to myself I'd never step foot in that house again. After that dinner, I meant every word I said. I was finished. The very next morning, I blocked their numbers. No more late-night calls, no more guilt trips, no more pretending we were a family. At first, it felt strange. My phone would buzz, and I'd see their names flash before the block went through. For years, I had dropped everything to answer, even if it was just to listen to criticism. Now, I let the silence replace their voices. I packed my things within weeks. The town I grew up in felt heavy with memories I wanted to forget. The school where no one came to my recitals, the restaurants where Caleb was treated like a prince while I was an afterthought, even the grocery store where my mom would parade him around like a trophy. I found a small apartment about an hour away. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms, creaky floors, and thin walls, but for the first time it was mine. I painted the walls soft blue, filled the shelves with secondhand books, and placed a little plant by the window. It felt like freedom. Work became my anchor. I volunteered for extra shifts at the hospital, losing myself in the rhythm of beeping machines and hurried footsteps. The exhaustion was heavy, but it was a kind of exhaustion that felt earned. Every hour I worked meant money I saved, a step further away from ever needing anyone else. My coworker, Maya Thompson, became the closest thing I had to family. She noticed how I kept myself busy, staying late almost every night. One evening, when we finally sat down for a quick coffee break, she looked at me with her steady brown eyes and said, "You know, sometimes blood doesn't mean family. You don't owe them your peace." Her words stuck with me. It was the first time someone put into words what I had been feeling deep inside. Maybe I didn't have the kind of parents who cherished me. Maybe I didn't have a brother who cared. But I had people like Maya, who saw me for who I was, not who I wasn't. I started tracking my savings carefully, watching the numbers in my account grow month by month. It wasn't much at first, but every dollar mattered. I cut back on extras, cooked at home, and told myself this was the foundation of something bigger. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. I was building a safety net, one that belonged to me and me alone. Nights in my little apartment were quiet. Sometimes too quiet. I'd sit by the window, staring at the lights of the city, and wonder if my parents even missed me. Then I'd remember my mother's words, "You'll never amount to anything." And the knot in my chest would harden again. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. All I needed was my own strength. And piece by piece, day by day, I was finding it. The years moved forward, and I refused to stand still. Cutting ties with my family had left me with a strange mix of emptiness and freedom. But I chose to focus on what I could control, my own future. I threw myself into my work, no longer just to make ends meet, but to build a life worth living. I enrolled in advanced nursing certifications, spending long nights studying after grueling shifts. The textbooks were thick, the exams exhausting, but each step forward gave me a sense of purpose I had never felt at home. Slowly, the recognition I had always longed for came. Not from my parents, but from colleagues, supervisors, and patients who valued what I brought to the table. After a few years, I was promoted to head nurse at one of the most respected hospitals in the state. Walking into that building every day, wearing the badge that carried my title, I felt something I never thought I would, pride that wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval. I had built this with my own hands, my own sleepless nights, my own sacrifices. Along the way, I found something I hadn't expected. Real support. The people I worked with became more than co-workers. Doctors who respected my decisions, younger nurses who sought my advice, and friends who celebrated my wins without jealousy. They became the family I never had. When I stumbled, they encouraged me. When I succeeded, they cheered. And when I doubted myself, they reminded me of how far I had come. Life began to feel steady, even joyful in ways I hadn't imagined before. But every so often, whispers about my brother reached me, carried by relatives who still lived in my hometown. Caleb's business didn't work out. One aunt mentioned casually at a distant cousin's wedding I reluctantly attended. Another time, a cousin texted me saying, "Your brother's looking rough these days, something about investors pulling out." At first, I brushed it off. Caleb had always bounced back, cushioned by my parents' endless support. But the rumors kept growing darker. Failed ventures, mounting debt, angry investors who had been promised too much and given nothing. He was no longer the golden boy. He was a sinking ship. The biggest blow came when I overheard that the $250,000 my parents had given him was gone. Every cent wasted on failed startups and reckless spending. I should have felt pity, maybe even sorrow, but what I felt instead was something colder, sharper. A bittersweet satisfaction spread through me. That money, the very gift that had been used to stamp me as worthless, had vanished into thin air. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't mourn either. I simply let the truth settle inside me. They had gambled everything on Caleb, and the gamble had failed. Meanwhile, the daughter they dismissed was standing taller than ever. The contrast was its own quiet revenge, and I didn't have to lift a finger. It was a Saturday evening when the knock came at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I rarely had visitors outside of a few close friends. At first, I thought it might be a neighbor or maybe a delivery at the wrong apartment. But when I opened the door, I froze. Standing there was Caleb, my brother. He didn't look anything like the polished, confident man who used to strut around family dinners bragging about his big ideas. His shirt was wrinkled, his face unshaven, and his eyes had dark circles carved beneath them. He looked smaller somehow, weighed down by something heavier than just exhaustion. "Hannah," he said quickly, as if afraid I might slam the door right away. "I need to talk to you." I didn't invite him in. I stood there, gripping the edge of the door, my stomach twisting. "What are you doing here?" He shifted uncomfortably, glancing past me into the apartment as if hoping I'd step aside. "Look, I need some help. Things haven't been going well. Mom and Dad they said you could spare something." My jaw clenched. After everything, after the insults, the favoritism, the $250,000 gift they claimed I wasn't worthy of, they still had the nerve to send him to me. "They told you to come to me?" I asked, my voice sharp. "They still think I owe you something?" He frowned, his tone turning defensive. "Don't start. You've always been jealous. Always trying to make me look bad because they believed in me more than you. Just help me out this once, okay? The words hit me like fire, not because they surprised me, but because they were so predictable. Even at rock bottom, Caleb couldn't take responsibility. He couldn't admit that he had wasted everything, that he had failed over and over. Instead, he leaned on the old narrative, Hannah the jealous sister, Hannah the bitter one. My hand tightened on the door. Jealous? I almost laughed, though there was no humor in it. You were handed everything, and you squandered it. I built my life with nothing, and now you think I should save you? No, Caleb. I don't owe you a thing. His face hardened. You're cold. Heartless. After everything. I didn't let him finish. With one final push, I slammed the door in his face. The sound echoed through my apartment, my heart pounding as I leaned against it. On the other side, I heard his muffled curse, then the sound of his footsteps fading down the hall. For a moment, I closed my eyes, letting the silence return. A part of me felt the sting of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by something stronger, relief. For once, I hadn't folded. For once, I had chosen myself. Caleb had come to my door empty-handed and desperate, but I refused to be his safety net. He had taken enough from me already. This time, the answer was final, no. The call came on a quiet evening after a long shift at the hospital. I almost didn't answer when I saw the familiar number flashing across my phone screen. For years, I had kept them at a distance, refusing to reopen old wounds. But curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up. Hannah. My mother's voice came through, a mix of hesitation and urgency. It felt strange hearing her after all that time. My father's voice followed soon after, firm but weary. We need to talk. I stayed silent, waiting. My heart was steady now in a way it never used to be with them. It's about your brother, my mom said finally. He's struggling. You know Caleb, he's had a rough time. We've done what we can, but he needs more. He's your brother, Hannah. Families stick together. Her words dripped with the same expectation I had grown up under. That I should sacrifice, stay quiet, and fall in line for Caleb's sake. It was the same song they had been singing my whole life. Something inside me hardened. My voice came out colder than I expected. Families don't call their daughter worthless. Families don't tell her she'll never amount to anything. There was a sharp pause on the other end. My father's tone turned sharp, defensive. We didn't mean it like that. You're twisting things. Caleb is in trouble, and you're making this about you. Stop being so selfish. My mother chimed in, her voice rising. Do you hear yourself? He's drowning, Hannah, and you're turning your back on him. Heartless, that's what you are. Heartless. Once upon a time, words like those would have cut me down. I would have cried into my pillow, wondering why I was never enough, wondering how I could bend myself smaller to fit their idea of love. But not now. Not anymore. I didn't feel tears building. I didn't feel shame crawling into my chest. Instead, I felt distance, like their voices were coming from another lifetime. Their anger no longer carried the weight it once did. You can call me selfish, you can call me heartless, I said quietly, steady. But I won't carry Caleb's failures. Not for you. Not for him. Before either of them could reply, I pressed the red button and ended the call. The silence that followed was sharp, almost startling, but it wasn't empty. It was freedom. I stared at the dark screen of my phone, half expecting the old ache to creep back in, but it didn't. For the first time in my life, their words didn't have claws. They couldn't reach me anymore. In that moment, I realized their power over me had finally broken. Whatever guilt they tried to throw, whatever names they tried to call me, it no longer mattered. I had let go of their hold. And for the first time, I truly felt untouchable. Word about Caleb's downfall reached me in fragments, whispered through relatives who still lived in my hometown. At first it was just murmurs, another failed business, another deal gone bad. But soon the whispers grew louder. Investors were filing lawsuits. He had promised them returns he couldn't deliver, and now they were dragging him through court. The golden boy image my parents had worked so hard to protect was crumbling in public. The Whitaker name, once something they paraded around proudly, was now tied to scandal. People in town began talking openly, no longer with admiration but with pity or scorn. I heard that my parents started selling off pieces of their life to shield Caleb. The car my father once polished every Saturday was gone. The vacation cabin they used to brag about was listed quietly and sold. They were stripping themselves bare to keep Caleb afloat, throwing everything they had into a sinking ship. Then one evening, an invitation arrived in my mailbox. Not a card, not a formal letter, Just a plain envelope with my mother's familiar handwriting. Inside was a note. Family dinner. We need to talk. Please come. I stared at it for a long time. A year ago, maybe even months ago, I would have torn it up and thrown it in the trash. But this time, something inside me shifted. I didn't mistake it for reconciliation. I knew better than to believe they suddenly saw me differently. But part of me wanted to face them, to stand in the same room and no longer feel small. The night of the gathering, I drove back to the town I had avoided for years. The streets were the same, but the weight I carried there had changed. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed right away how different the house looked. The yard was less kept, the shutters needed paint. Pride had slipped through the cracks. Inside, the air felt tense. Caleb was at the table, but he wasn't smug anymore. His shoulders were slumped, his face pale, eyes darting like a man waiting for a verdict. My parents sat close to him, protective as ever, but their expressions were worn and tired. They looked older than I remembered. "Hannah," my mother said, her voice strained. "Thank you for coming." I gave a short nod, not offering a smile. My father gestured to the seat across from Caleb. "We need to talk things over. As a family." I sat down, keeping my back straight. I wasn't there to mend anything. I wasn't there to carry their burdens. I was there to finally look them in the eyes and show them I wasn't the same daughter who used to beg for scraps of love. The weight of years hung in the silence between us. They had called me worthless once, and now they were sitting across from me, broken by the son they had sacrificed everything for. This time, I wasn't the one on trial. The tension at that gathering was thick enough to choke on. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, waiting, expecting. Caleb sat across the table, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. He looked nothing like the brother I once knew. He looked cornered, angry, humiliated. "You abandoned us," he spat suddenly, breaking the silence. "You walked away when this family needed you. You think you're better than us just because you've got a job title and a paycheck. You've always been jealous." His words rolled off me in a way they never used to. Once, I would have rushed to defend myself, to explain that I wasn't jealous, that I had only ever wanted to be treated fairly. But now, I didn't flinch. My parents jumped in before I could even answer. My mother's voice rose, sharp and defensive. "Caleb is right. You've turned cold, Hannah. You've lost your compassion. We raised you better than this. Family doesn't walk away." My father's face hardened, his tone carrying the same weight it always had. "We're not asking for much. He's your brother. You have a good career, a stable life. You could help him, but you refuse. You've become selfish." I sat there calm, my hands folded on the table. For once, I didn't feel small under their judgment. I felt steady. I took a slow breath and looked at each of them, one by one. "You say I abandoned you," I began quietly, "but the truth is you abandoned me years ago. Every time you told me Caleb was the future. Every time you dismissed my work. Every time you made it clear I was second best." Their faces tightened, but I pressed on. "I built everything I have by myself. My career, my home, my life. No one handed it to me. I worked double shifts, studied when I was exhausted, and pushed myself harder than anyone else ever expected me to. Meanwhile, Caleb was given $250,000 and wasted it. And now you want me to fix the mess he made." Caleb's face turned red, but he didn't speak. My mother opened her mouth, but I didn't let her interrupt. "I was worthless to you until you needed me," I said, my voice sharp now, the anger that had lived in me for years finally finding words. "Now, suddenly, my success matters, because you want me to save you. But I won't." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents looked stunned, their mouths tight, their eyes darting between me and Caleb. For the first time, I had spoken without fear, and they had no answer. I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping against the floor, and stood. "I'm done here," I said. And with that, I walked out, slamming the door behind me. The sound echoed in the hallway as I left them sitting there, speechless in the ruins of the family they had chosen to break long before I ever did. Months passed, and the Whitaker name began to unravel in ways I had long stopped imagining. Caleb, once the golden child with his parents' endless praise and their fortune at his disposal, finally hit the wall he'd been running toward his whole life. Bankruptcy. The word spread quickly through town, whispered in grocery store aisles and murmured in hushed tones at the local diner. Caleb Whitaker, the man with all the opportunities, had lost everything. It didn't end with him. My parents, who had poured their savings and pride into covering for his failures, were dragged down right alongside him. They sold off pieces of their life quietly. First their vacation property, then the second car, then little by little the comfort they had always flaunted. Neighbors noticed, of course. They always do. The Whitakers, who once strutted about like they were better than everyone else, became the subject of pity and ridicule. Meanwhile, my own life was a different story. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. Years of dedication, study, and determination finally paid off. I had been promoted to hospital administrator, a role I never thought I'd reach when I was that girl helping with the less important tasks at family dinners. I had a team who respected me, colleagues who valued my judgment, and a career that gave me stability and purpose. It wasn't revenge that fueled me. It was peace. I didn't need to lift a finger against them, didn't need elaborate schemes or confrontations anymore. Their downfall was written into the choices they made, into every time they chose blind favoritism over fairness, every time they invested in Caleb's illusions instead of acknowledging the worth of the daughter they dismissed. The whispers around town became a strange chorus, not of my making, but of truth exposing itself. The Whitakers gave everything to Caleb, and look where it got them. That daughter of theirs, what was her name? Hannah? She's the one who made something of herself. I never called them again. I never picked up the phone, never answered their names in my inbox. There was no need. Their voices no longer had power over me. Their approval no longer mattered. Their disapproval even less. On quiet evenings in my apartment, I would sit with a cup of tea, sometimes thinking back to the girl who once cried herself to sleep after being told she was worthless. That girl was gone. What remained was a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ashes of neglect, who had stood when no one thought she could. In the end, revenge wasn't something I had to plan or chase. It happened all on its own, not through cruelty, but through the natural weight of choices made and ignored. Turns out the worthless one was the only one who learned how to stand on her own. What about Hannah's choice? Was she right to cut ties completely, or should she have given her family another chance? Share your thoughts down below. I'd really like to hear them. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you'll always know when the next one is out.